Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to Transform Mastermind. My name is Tim Sparks, and this is part 4 in our ongoing series on the Change Leader Model. The Change Leader Model is part of my new book, which is entitled Your Journey to Becoming a Great Change Leader, and it's due out in December. I hope you decide to pick up a copy. But in these sessions, we've been talking about the Change Leader Model, and the Change Leader Model is really kind of a step-by-step process that guides the leader to help them lead people through times of change. As you know, leadership can be a challenge in the best of times, and so leading people through times of significant organizational change in your company can be a real challenge. And these sessions are designed to help you learn some tools and learn some principles that will help you to really just kind of lead your people successfully through these difficult times, through these times of change. And so in the past few weeks, we've been talking about the first two segments of the Change Leader Model, and that is change readiness. And then last week we talked about change management or people management. And today we're going to talk about change communication. Now, communication is critical regardless of what you're doing in any organization. Communication as a leader is one of the most important skills that you'll develop and enhance over your career. Especially during times of change, though, communication is so critical, and I would say that this is probably the most important piece of the Change Leader Model because communication is so important. I always tell people you cannot over communicate during times of change. You simply cannot over communicate. I used to be a teacher and principal for 15 years, and one of the things that we as teachers used to remind each other of was that repetition is the key to learning. And that's so true not only when you're teaching, grade school kids, high school kids, whatever, but even when you're leading people, repetition is the key to learning. And so you cannot over communicate during times of organizational change. And when I say that, I don't mean that you should say the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. It's not sending out the same lame email 50 times to your staff and expecting them to get it. Last week when we talked about people management, we talked about learning styles and how different people have different learning styles, different dominant learning styles that affect how they absorb information, how they want to absorb information. And so one of the critical pieces of being a people leader in your organization is knowing your people, knowing how they want to be communicated with, knowing what their style is, and adapting your message to fit their style. You can't, the idea of you being the manager and, this is the way I communicate, and if you don't get it, too bad, that's going to make you a terrible leader. And not to put too fine a point on it, but that's exactly correct. If you think that because of your title and your position in the organization that everyone else should have to adapt to you and to your style and to your message, then you're wrong. And you need to adapt your style and your communication so that you reach the biggest possible population in your organization in order to make change initiatives successful. Keep in mind that when we talk about communication is a process. It's not an event. Communication is not something you do once and then you're done. It's not even something you do 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 times and you're done. Communication is an ongoing process that happens all the time. One of the common mistakes that people make during times of change, especially, is that when a leader thinks that the change initiative is quote unquote done, then they stop communicating. And that's the worst possible thing you can do. Communication has to continue, and it has to be two-way communication. It has to be you giving information and requesting feedback from your people so that you can really kind of open all the doors and consider all of the things. Because I have news for you, and this is going to come as a shock to some of you maybe, but no one knows everything. And you as a change leader don't know everything. Even if the change initiative is your idea, this is your brainchild, and this is something that you put together, there's going to be something that you haven't thought of. And one day somebody's going to raise their hand in a meeting somewhere and say, well, boss, what about XYZ? And you're going to say, you know, that's something I really hadn't considered. And if you don't have that two-way communication going, if it's just you giving and giving without taking or accepting feedback in return, then you're not going to really vet your decisions 100% correctly. So you want to make sure that communication is two-way. You want to solicit that feedback, and there's going to be times when somebody's going to ask a question that you just don't know the answer to. And you know what? That's okay. You don't have to have all the answers. But a great change leader is someone who can say to their people, you know what? That is something I haven't considered. I don't know the answer to that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. What do you think? And that goes for everybody on the team. If you've got something that you can contribute, I'm all ears. Let me have it. And when you do that, you really endear yourself to your people, and they know that you value their opinion, and that really opens up that two-way communication. And one of the things that we're going to talk about today, it's a communication model that really talks about anticipating questions. And remember, sometimes questions, your employees are definitely going to have questions. When you come out and say, you know what, we're going to initiate this change, we're going to go from this way of doing things to this way of doing things, and your people are going to have questions. Now, sometimes those questions are going to be spoken, and sometimes they're going to be unspoken. So it's up to you as a leader to kind of anticipate those questions, to anticipate those thoughts in your employee's head that may or may not come out of their mouths, but it's going to be something that may affect the success of your change initiative. And so you need to really kind of anticipate those questions. And so what we talk about in the change leader, the communication model, is a couple of different categories. The first one is the intellectual piece. In other words, you really have to get into your employees' minds, into their brains, into their head, and find out what's going on in there. So being a change leader, a great change leader, sometimes is part being a shrink. You have to be a psychologist to be able to get into the brain of your employee to figure out what's going on in there. And one of the things that they're going to ask, whether it's outwardly or not, is they're going to say, what's the big deal? Why is this so important? Why can't we just keep doing things the way we're doing? Why do we have to change to this new way of doing things? That's probably a big question that will be on everybody's mind once you announce change. And so you have to have an answer for that. You have to know why it's important that you're changing from the old state to the new state. And another thing that they're going to ask maybe is, who's driving this? Is this my boss? Is this my boss's idea? Is this my boss's boss's idea? Is this my boss's 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 idea? How far up the food chain does this thing go? And you ask me, Tim, why is that important? Well, it's important because it will affect how they react to the change and how they give that two-way feedback. So if it's your idea, if this is something that you're driving, then if you've built up a really good trust among your people and have a really good relationship with them, they're going to feel very open and able to ask you anything, even if it seems harsh. But if it goes further up the food chain, all the way up to the CEO even, then employees will kind of feel this helplessness where they don't really have anywhere to turn. There's no way they can give that feedback. And so it's up to you as a change leader to anticipate that question so that you can tell them, even though this isn't my idea, even though I'm not the one driving this, it's okay to question. It's okay to give feedback. And I want that feedback. and I will make sure that the feedback goes up the chain as far as it needs to go to get you an answer. So again, the first piece is really just getting into the brain of your people. One of the other questions they're going to have is, do I have the skills necessary to be successful in this new change? And if I don't, is my company, is my organization going to be willing to train me? Are they going to be investing in me and helping me to accumulate those skills so that I can be successful in the new change? Again, there's all kinds of questions that you can anticipate in this intellectual piece. But it's important to anticipate these questions so that you can, when you release information to your teams, you're already answering some of the questions that they're going to bring up. You may not get them all, and you won't get them all, but it's important to anticipate those questions that will probably come up so that you can handle it. The second part of this communication model is the emotional part. And we've said before in previous weeks that change is emotional. You know, people react emotionally anytime something new is announced. It could be positive emotions, could be negative emotions, could be, you know, on a small scale, could be on a huge scale. It really depends. Each individual is going to react differently. So one of the biggest emotional questions that people are going to ask themselves or ask you is, what does this mean for me? Am I going to have a job in this new state, or is my job going to be eliminated? I guarantee you that's probably the first question that everyone is going to think of when you initiate or when you announce change. Change is scary to a lot of people, and so it's important that you, number one, know the answer to that question, and there may be some change initiatives where it may mean that some people are going to lose their jobs. Some positions are going to be eliminated just because of redundancies or because of efficiencies. But you need to be open and honest about that from the beginning. And if the answer is yes, you are going to have a job when all of this is said and done, you need to be able to show compassion and let people know that yes, we value you. You're a big part of this organization, and you're going to be a big part of this change, and we want you to stick around. We want you to be part of all of this, and yes, you will have a position when we're done. One of the other things they're going to ask in this emotional piece is, what am I going to have to do? What am I going to have to change? How is this going to affect my role? Am I going to be doing something completely different? Is it going to be slightly different for me, or is it going to be no change at all for me? People want to know how their role in the organization is going to be affected when you announce change. And so it's important that you understand what everybody's role is in the organization so that you can answer those questions as well. And then one of the biggest things that comes in this emotional piece, and we talked in the intellectual piece about getting into your employee's head. The emotional piece is where you kind of get into their heart. You have to figure out where their emotions are. And one of the most common questions that employees are going to ask, again, either outwardly or ask themselves, is the WIFM. Have you ever heard of WIFM? It's WIIFM, and it stands for what's in it for me. Employees are going to ask that question. Why is this good? What's in this for me? And a lot of times they'll even say, we've been doing things this way for 25 years. Why do we have to change now? What's my motivation for doing this change? And people need to understand that there's got to be something in it for them. And you as a change leader need to be able to address that when that question comes up. Because it's not enough that it's going to help the organization, although great employees will understand that if it's good for the organization, then it's good for them. But a lot of times employees will want to know personally what's in it for me. And so you need to be able to answer those questions as well. And then the third component, or the third piece of this communication model is really about forward action. And so we're talking about how do you sustain this? How do you, when they do get to the change and they're working in the new change, how do you keep it going? How do you sustain that? And so one of the questions that they may ask you, or you should ask yourself, is how is their work going to be recognized? If their behavior and their work is what we're looking to see in this new state, in this new model, then how am I going to reward that? You can't just, expect people to change and do something completely different than they've done for years, potentially, and then not say anything and expect that to stick. You need to be able to recognize good performance and good behavior, the performance and behavior that you're looking for, and then reward that. Because if you reward it, then not only will that employee continue to demonstrate that performance or that behavior, but others around will see that as well. And they'll understand that, hey, there's maybe that's the WIFM, maybe that's what's in it for me, is the reward of doing a good job, and being rewarded by the company. So recognition and rewards are really a big key to sustainability in all of this. And so it's important in the communication piece that you communicate what those rewards are going to be and what things you're looking for to reward. What are those behaviors? What are those performance actions that employees need to take in order to see some praise and recognition? And communicate that ahead of time so that employees know exactly what's expected of them, what is going to garner them some recognition from the boss, and that gives them the capabilities to try to achieve that. Another thing, talking about the sustainability piece, one of the questions that will always come up when change is initiated is, how is my workload going to change? And I think we all know the answer to that. Anytime, especially in today's day and age, the mantra is always do more with less, right? And so we have this idea that whenever we change, we're changing to become more efficient, more just to do things easier and better. And so people are going to want to know, and I think they have a pretty good idea in the back of their mind how my workload's going to be affected. It's probably going to increase. But if it's going to increase, is the change going to give them more tools to be able to handle that increase? Are you giving them some tools and some software programs or whatever it is? Is that going to help them bear that additional burden with ease, or is it going to be, again, just a burden on them going forward? And so you need to have an answer. You need to communicate that piece to them. Say, yes, you're going to pick up a new customer to take care of in this new state, but the change is going to help you be more efficient in your care of the customers that you have. And so it should be an easier process to deal with that. And so you need to have those answers as well. And then one of the questions in this piece that they'll ask is, what do I need to focus on? What's the most important thing for me to focus on? How can I be successful in this change? What's the mission? What's the vision that I have to embrace to be successful in all of this? What are the values and goals that are necessary to embrace in order to be successful? So in change communication, it's so critical to be ahead of your employees. You need to anticipate what they're going to ask, what they're going to feel, and what they're going to think, so that you can develop and put together a communication plan. And by the way, That is a key element to change communication. Is you have to plan your communication. It can't be fly by the seat of your pants. Okay, we ran into this thing today, so let's send out an email or let's bring everybody together and talk about this. You need to have a plan going forward. Now, again, you're not going to anticipate everything. You're not going to be able to have all the answers, but it's incredibly important that you plan your communication ahead of time and try to anticipate a lot of these questions so that you answer them even before the employee knows that they have a question. So this communication piece is really critical. Plan your communication, anticipate what your employees are going to think, what they're going to feel, and how you can motivate them to continue and sustain the actions that you want to see. And if you can do that, then that is a huge part of the communication process. So that's really all I have for today. We're done a little early, but again, we'll pick up next week to talk a little bit more about some of the change communication pieces that go along with this. We'll talk about things like frame of reference and things like that. So tune in next Monday at 4 o'clock and we'll continue this. But until then, thanks for joining us, and we will see you next week. Have a great day.